Good morning, CPAC. We want to welcome you from sunny, but not warm, Jerusalem. We are sitting here in ancient Jerusalem, which we are going to explain to you very shortly. I am R.A. Lightstone. I am Ambassador David Friedman, Senior Advisor at our embassy in Jerusalem, Israel, and it's my honor to moderate this morning's conversation in between two real heroes of the U.S.-Israel relationship, of our Judeo-Christian heritage. And on my left, Ambassador David Friedman, who I don't believe requires any introduction to your crowd or any other crowd. We normally go through his bio, but it updates so frequently that all you can talk about is the most recent accomplishments. So whether it's the recognition of Jerusalem, the moving of the embassy, the Pompeo Doctrine, et cetera, et cetera. Again, Ambassador Friedman honors us with his presence, and I know this is his first time.
What's wrong with the Golan Heights? You don't like the Golan Heights?
I don't have notes in front of me. It's difficult to keep track of everything you've done recently. But I know he's excited to be here with you at CPAC, both digitally and shortly in person as well. And Zev, if you haven't met Zev, that's just because you haven't been around CPAC long enough. Zev is a long-standing, significant member of policy coming from Jerusalem and bringing it to the United States of America. Zev, we are so excited to spend today with you. So you might ask, on a cold, almost rainy day here in Jerusalem, why are we sitting outside and why are we sitting here? There's so much interesting things that we can be at and so many cool places we can see. Why are we sitting right here at this point in time? So without any further introduction, Zev, tell us where we are and why it matters.
So right now we're sitting in the city of David. Up until 150 years ago, when people thought, where is the original biblical city of Jerusalem, everyone imagined it was the old city of Jerusalem, inside the walls of the old city. Until 1867, when Queen Victoria of England wants to discover the treasures of the Bible, like the Ark of the Covenant. She sends a man by the name of Captain Charles Warren to the Holy Land to find those treasures. And if you're going to search for the treasures of the Bible anywhere in the Holy Land, you'll come to Jerusalem. And you'll go to the Temple Mount, the biblical Mount Moriah. And so that's what Charles Warren does. And in 1867, he comes. Except in that year, the Ottomans, the Muslims, are ruling this area. And they say, Charles, we're sure you are a great guy, but you are not going to dig up the Temple Mount. Right? The Temple Mount being the site where the first temple built by Solomon, King David's son, stood. The second temple built a few decades afterwards, which was destroyed by the Romans in the year 70. Charles Warren can't dig there. But he understands he can't go back to the queen empty-handed. And so he says, if I can't dig on the Temple Mount, dig on the site of the biblical Mount Moriah, where the binding of Isaac, as recounted in the book of Genesis, took place, then I will do the next best thing, which is to dig near the Temple Mount. He comes down the slopes of Mount Moriah, and he finds a spring, a spring flowing for thousands of years, known as the Gihon Spring. And he sees the spring is flowing through an ancient man-made tunnel. He begins to walk through this tunnel, not realizing it is a tunnel dating back some 2,700 years, engineered by the biblical King Hezekiah. And he ends up coming up with a theory. And the theory is that the original biblical city of Jerusalem, the city of David, the city of Solomon, the prophets, Isaiah and Jeremiah, the biblical city of David, is not located inside the walls of the old city, but in fact located outside. At that time, the whole world thinks he's crazy. Except over the next 150 years, where we're sitting right now in the city of David becomes one of the most archaeologically excavated sites in the world, the most excavated site in this country. And the antiquities that have been discovered over those last 150 years, and certainly over the last few years here, have shown that the connection of Jews and Christians to Jerusalem, to our shared biblical heritage here, is not simply a matter of faith, but a matter of fact.
I mean, you make history come alive. You make it feel so real and so present. And I know that the ambassador has a chance to be here more than just once. Ambassador, why do you come to the city of David, and what's unique about this administration making the city of David, a place that you frequent?
Well, as a Jew and as an American, this is the one place where both of my heritages really began. This is the place where Judaism began, where Abraham showed his commitment to God, where King David united the people of Israel under a single kingdom in Jerusalem, where the temples stood for 1,000 years. And as an American, it's also the place where our values began as well, where our Judeo-Christian values began. If you look at the foundational documents of our republic, the Declaration of Independence, the founding fathers observed that all people were endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and others. Now, how did our creators know what God had endowed as being unalienable? They didn't say, you know, it's a good idea for people to have life, or it's a great idea for people to be free. They said that these rights are unalienable and they come from God. Well, where did the word of God come from? Isaiah tells us, out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the source of our Judeo-Christian values that we as Americans cherish. And this is the site where, as an observant Jew, as a practicing Jew, I can look back and see an ancient people still alive today, observing the same religion, in the same language, in the same place that we did 3,000 years ago. And to me, that's very powerful. So it's a pretty good reason to keep coming back. I mean, this is a very, very important, special, and powerful place.
I think that's an excellent reason to describe why you come here. I want to dig a little bit deeper, pun not intended here, on that particular example. You know, CPAC, one of the best parts about this organization is that the average age is significantly younger than almost any other gathering that shows up in Washington, D.C. And the power, the enthusiasm, the excitement in the room is contagious, and you can really feel it. You spoke about heritage. You spoke about the founding documents and doctrines of the country. Why is that relevant to the kids here in the audience, to the young men and the young women? Why does that matter?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, we need to know where we came from. We need to understand the values that animate and give life to our nation, whether it's Americans, Israelis, Jews, Christians. These values have stood the test of time. They are immutable. They're not subject to negotiation. And our republic, the future of our republic, is dependent upon our ability to stay true to these values that really came from our Creator. So it's incredibly important to the future. Also, as we struggle with all the challenges that Israel faces, all the political and geopolitical problems, you know, there's a difference between going to a museum and seeing an ancient shard of glass, or an old coin, or a piece of parchment. I mean, you come to the city of David and you can immerse yourself in the history of the Jewish people. You can go back to the beginnings of Judaism. You can go back to the beginnings of Christianity. You can walk along this road from the Pool of Siloam up until the Temple Mount, and take the same steps that Jesus took when he visited the temple, as he was wont to do and as he enjoyed doing, or the Jewish nation as they came on various pilgrimages throughout the year. So this immersive experience is like no other, and it also is the answer to all the falsehoods that Jews and Christians face every day about the inauthenticity of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Now, we all know that's not true, but here's a way to actually see it for yourself. The United Nations is shameless, and their willingness to deny the connection of the Jewish people and of the Christian faith to Jerusalem. But you come here and you can't deny it anymore. You know, I carry with me some coins.
Wait, I want to save that as the...
You don't want to see my coin?
I
nice
want to
coin.
see all of your coins. I just
It cost me a lot of money.
Right
I think you'd want to see it, you know.
I'd like to have one of the coins. You mentioned two things, Mr. Ambassador, if I can just jump in for 1 second. Number one is that this is not about history. This is about today, and more importantly, about the future. So all of you watching this now live, this is not just a historical site. It's also a site that, as the ambassador points out so eloquently, is about our today and it's about our future. And you also mentioned an immersive experience. I can't help but turn to you and say, from an immersive experience perspective, tell us exactly where we are. It seems like every 3, 4, 5 feet that you move over here, there's another piece of history, but there's something unique about us beginning this conversation right here as we begin our journey. Explain where we are, Zev.
So 2004, we're about 20 feet underground. There is a sewage pipe not far from where we're sitting. And in 2004, that sewage pipe bursts. So now the Jerusalem municipality has to come with construction crews to repair the sewage pipe. But Jerusalem is not just another municipality, and the city of David is not just another part of Jerusalem. And so when a sewage pipe bursts here, you don't only send in construction crews, you also send in archaeologists. So the construction crews are doing their work, the bulldozers, dump trucks doing their thing. And the archaeologists, they begin to hear scraping, scratching. It doesn't sound right. They clear everyone out. And it turns out that in repairing the sewage pipe, they had inadvertently uncovered the steps that the audience here is sitting on right now. 2,000-year-old steps, going back to the time of Herod, going back to the time of Jesus. And they said there's only one other place in Jerusalem with steps just like these, and these are the steps leading up to the southern ascent of the Temple Mount by the Hulda Gates, the southern steps with deep significance to Christians and to Jews. And they said there must be a connection between these two sets of stairs separated by nearly half a mile. And they realized that the steps where we are right now lead down into what is known biblically as the ancient Pool of Siloam. Now, the Pool of Siloam has deep significance to Christians and to Jews. To Christians, it's the site in the Christian scriptures mentioned in the book of John of the healing of the blind man. In the Bible, this is the place the Bible tells us there are 3 times during the year: Passover, Pentecost, Tabernacles. Passover, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, when all of Israel has to go up to the temple. Now, before you can go up to the temple, you have to purify yourself. You have to cleanse yourself. The historian Josephus says that 2,000 years ago on Passover, for instance, nearly 3 million people would have gone up on pilgrimage. So the question the archaeologists had was, how did everyone get from the pool up to the temple on the Temple Mount? And if this is the pool where we're sitting right now, the Pool of Siloam, which only a small part of it has been excavated today, so then the question was, what does this then lead to?
It's a great question. I think we're going to actually go see that ourselves in just a moment. Before we go do that, so let me ask you differently. From a policy perspective, what does Jerusalem mean to you? What does it mean to the United States of America?
The spirit of Jerusalem is the spirit that founded our nation. When John Winthrop was entering Massachusetts Bay, he asked for the favor of the God of Israel and felt that he was coming to what he considered to be the New Jerusalem. John Adams, second president of the United States, talked about how important it would be for there to be a new nation formed of the ancient Jewish people in Judea. In 1844, the United States opened up a consulate in Jerusalem. 1844, it's 104 years before the independence of the State of Israel. The United States was already opening up a consulate. The consul general, a guy by the name of Warder Crescent, came to the Jaffa Gate. He planted an American flag, and he said, "We hereby extend the protection of the United States over the Jews of Jerusalem." Mark Twain, Ulysses Grant, Abraham Lincoln in Ford's Theater right before he died. The Civil War was over. His wife said to him, "Now that the war is over, what would you like to do?" He said, "I'd really like to travel and visit Jerusalem." This is who we are as Americans. That's why in 1995, by majorities of 90% majorities in the House and the Senate, we passed the Jerusalem Embassy Act, in which Congress recognized and President Clinton allowed it to become law, the recognition of Jerusalem as the undivided capital of the State of Israel. This is where I'm repeating myself, I know, but this is where our heritage came from. You look at websites now like Ancestry.com, everybody wants to know where they came from. It's essential to our future to know where we came from. It's essential to know what our parents and our forefathers and their ancestors, what motivated them to forge this great nation in America, and the same token, to create the State of Israel. And without Jerusalem, we are untethered to the values and the principles that informed our fathers, our founding fathers, and that created our great nation. I still think that the greatest experiment in self-government in human history, and it all came from the spirit and the teachings of Jerusalem, the prophets, the biblical writings, the teachings. This is who we are, and God forbid we should ever lose that, because if we lose that, I think as a nation we become untethered to the principles that have guided us successfully for the last 250 years.
So one of the fascinating things about Jerusalem is that it's ancient and it's old, and it's new and it's modern. And when somebody writes a book on Jerusalem, if you were to begin at the beginning, I presume that you would start here. If you were to write the last chapter or so, even perhaps the last couple of pages with a very large heading under that chapter, Ambassador, you've played a significant role in that. Would you mind just walking us through, if you will, from January 20th, 2017 until today, and how Jerusalem has changed in the eyes of the United States of America?
Well, it's interesting. Every candidate for president in modern times has promised to move the embassy to Jerusalem. We've had a law on the books since 1995, as I said, that required that even though the law provided a 6-month opportunity for the president to waive the move of the embassy, there was never any statutory opportunity to waive the recognition of Jerusalem. And somehow, even without any ability not to do it, presidents of both parties neglected this statutory obligation. President Trump came along, and I think his decision to recognize Jerusalem, to move the embassy, accomplished 2 things. The first thing is that it fulfilled a promise to the American people that was embodied in our laws for a quarter of a century. Equally important, I think what the president said is he's going to stand on the side of truth, stand on the side of history, and he's not going to allow petty politics to interfere with with something that is so fundamentally true and right and important and recognized by the people of the United States through their representatives by overwhelming majorities. And it more than anything else, I think, it distinguished our president from his predecessors by showing that he wasn't someone who took promises lightly. He wasn't a career politician, and he would stand for things that were right. And that has resonated, I think, throughout the world. Our foreign policy throughout the world has been advantaged significantly because of the principled stand the president took with regard to Jerusalem.
Well, Ambassador, you're not going to brag about that, but I know that the president was advised and to stand on the side of truth, and I'll brag on your behalf. We all know that you played a completely and totally instrumental role in helping that happen. And for all of us here, we appreciate that. For all of us out there, I know that they appreciate that as well. Something that's interesting, Zevin, I'm going to turn it over to you. The concept of truth and history and facts started here, and if you walk over to Arnona over there, the same concept of history and facts and truth stand strong and stand true, uniting and combining Jerusalem and, again, the United States of America. Before we go on the walk, tell us what you want to tell us.
You know, we're in the city of David, biblical Jerusalem. It doesn't get older than where we are right now. Jerusalem has been a pilgrimage site for millennia for people of all faiths and backgrounds from all over the world. There's no shortage of ancient sites and structures in Jerusalem that people have been making pilgrimage to for thousands of years. It's rare in modern times to find a structure that becomes a pilgrimage site, that is imbued with sanctity almost. The United States Embassy in Jerusalem has become one of those sites. There's not a group that I host here in the city of David that at some point isn't saying to me, we either just came from or we're going to the embassy. That a trip to Israel today, a trip to Jerusalem today, you can go to the Western Wall, you can come to the city of David, the Mount of Olives, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Garden of Gethsemane. In that same conversation today has become the United States Embassy in Jerusalem. It's on that level almost of significance and sanctity to millions, if not billions, of people around the world.
Right. You know, they said it's not easy to create a new shrine in Jerusalem. I can tell you that one of the things that gives me tremendous satisfaction, sometimes I'll be done with work and get into the car, and as I'm going out the front, I see a tour bus is pulled up right to the plaque at the front, and 75 people get out of the bus and they're taking their turns online taking pictures. And so this happened a couple months ago. I was with Aryeh, and I got out of the car and I walked towards the front, and right away 5 or 6 people came over to me and said, there's a line, could you please wait your turn? And I said, of course I'll wait my turn, but I just thought you might want to say hello to me. And they said, well, why? And I said, well, if you look at this plaque, You see, the first name is Donald Trump. That's not me. And then the next one is Vice President Pence. That's not me. But the third guy, that's actually me. And the reaction that we get, and it never fails, is such an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Of gratitude, not to me, not to the president, really, gratitude to God that people were able to live to see the day that the United States Embassy found a home in Jerusalem. And it's an incredible, it never gets old, it's an incredible experience.
It does never get old, and with Jerusalem traffic, I oftentimes have a lot of time anticipating showing up to the office, and that's met with great enthusiasm. We are the only tourist site that does not sell keychains outside. If we had, we'd be able to pay for the embassy many times over. Zev, I think that we're going to go from here to the pool of Siloam, and we're going to go on a journey. We're going to go on that journey together. We invite you all to join us.
When do
on
I
that
get to
journey.
talk about the coin?
You get to talk about that.
To pull out the coin.
Next stop.
That's what we're planning.
Okay, just wanted to know.
You want me to hold it for you?
No, I can hold it.
I
It's
thought
okay.
so.
It's not going. Thanks. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.